We'll begin our study of electricity and magnetism by looking at charge, which is a fundamental property of all matter, given that matter is composed of atoms. And charge is a scalar quantity and described as either positive or negative. And now if we consider an atom here, it has a nucleus, and this nucleus in the middle is made up of protons, and a proton has a positive charge, and a nucleus is also made up of neutrons, which carry no charge. So these particles are referred to as nucleons, and orbiting the nucleus are electrons, which have a negative charge. So the magnitude of charge of a single electron or proton is called the elementary charge, and denoted E, which is 1.602 by 10 to the negative 19 coulombs. So effectively this is considered to be the smallest indivisible amount of charge. So effectively charge is quantized, so it's a multiple of an elementary charge, and denoted by Q. So in other words, the charge of an electron is minus E, and the charge of a proton is plus E. And again, the neutron has no electric charge. So a point charge is a model where the physical size of a charged object or system is negligible in the context of the problem being analyzed. And we'll look at this in more detail as we progress. Coulomb's law describes the electrostatic force between two charged objects. So suppose we have a charged object 1 and 2, then the magnitude of the electrostatic force is proportional to the magnitude of those charges, so Q1 and Q2, and inversely proportional to the square of the radial distance between them. And Coulomb's constant is the constant of proportionality, and it can be written in terms of the permittivity of free space. And we'll look at the permittivity of free space in more detail later on, and this form of the constant makes it more convenient to analyze spherically charged bodies. So given that the force is in newtons, then Coulomb's constant must have units of Newton, meters squared per Coulomb squared, because the charges each have a unit of Coulomb, and the radial distance between them has a length unit. So electric forces are one of the forces that hold the structure of an atom together. So for example, we have attractive forces between the protons and the electrons, whereas a nuclear strong force holds the nucleus together. And when we refer to charged objects, we can refer to charged bodies, ions, and so on. So for example, if we pop off this electron from the lithium atom using electromagnetic radiation, then we get a lithium ion, which we can treat as a positive charge. And similarly, if a chlorine atom gains an electron, we have a chlorine anion, which we can model as a negative charge. And these would exert an electric force on each other to form an ionic compound, being lithium chloride, which is electrically neutral because the positive charge cancels the negative charge. Now the direction of the electrostatic force depends on the signs of the charges of the interacting objects, and it acts along the line of separation between the objects. So if we consider this as a radial vector from charge 1 to charge 2, then we can write this electrostatic force in vector form, being the electrostatic force exerted by charge 1 on charge 2. So we talk about this force over here, and that's equal to Coulomb's constant multiplied by charge 1 and charge 2 on the square of the radial distance between them, and multiplied by the unit vector from charge 1 to charge 2. So that will be this unit vector over here. And this unit vector is the vector r normalized by its magnitude. So two objects with charges with the same sign exert repulsive forces on each other. So as we can see, if charge 1 and 2 are both positive, so we have the unit vector pointing in a direction from charge 1 to charge 2, and therefore the electric force of charge 1 on charge 2 acts in a positive direction. So it's effectively repelling charge 2 from charge 1. And in contrast, for example, where charge 1 is positive and charge 2 is negative, so effectively two objects with charges of opposite signs exert attractive forces on each other. So as we can see, the unit vector from charge 1 to charge 2 acts in a direction from charge 1 to charge 2, and this term here will be negative. So the force exerted by charge 1 on 2 will be attractive, or point towards charge 1. Now electric forces are responsible for some of the macroscopic properties of different objects. So for example, if we consider this lithium bar, it's made up of many atoms with delocalized electrons, and these give the bar special properties. So for example, it would have a tensile strength, because if we exert a tensile force on the bar, it's going to break when it reaches its strength. And we know that with metallic bars, we have delocalized electrons interacting with the positively charged core of the lithium atoms, which is known as metallic bonding, to provide certain properties to the bar. But given the large number of particle interactions that occur, it's more convenient to treat everyday forces in terms of non-fundamental forces. So recall the contact forces being the normal force. We have the friction force and the tension force that we mentioned. As we've seen previously, electrostatic forces can be attractive or repulsive based on the sign of the charge, whereas gravitational forces are always attractive. So for any two objects that have a mass and electric charge, the magnitude of the gravitational force is a lot smaller than the magnitude of the electrostatic force. So suppose we have a proton and an electron. So we have the mass of the proton and the mass of the electron here. And note the universal gravitational constant, which we've looked at in the mechanics part of the course. And here we have the permittivity of free space and the elementary charge being the magnitude of the charge of an electron and proton. So if we substitute the charge of the proton and the charge of the electron, which is negative, and the mass of the proton and the electron, and also the permittivity of free space and the gravitational constant that we're given here, and then we'll take the ratio of the magnitude of the electrostatic force to the magnitude of the gravitational force. So if you calculate this out, you'd get 2.269 by 10 to the 39. And note that the squared radial distance between the charges cancels. So as we can see, the magnitude of the electrostatic force is much larger than that of the gravitational force. So gravitational forces dominate at larger scales, even though they're weaker than electrostatic forces, because at large scales, systems tend to be electrically neutral. Recall that the Couloumb force, or the electrostatic force, has a magnitude that's equal to 1 over 4 pi by the vacuum permittivity, or permittivity of free space, multiplied by the magnitude of the two charges involved in the interaction over the square of the radial distance between those charges. Now suppose we have multiple charges that are exerting electrostatic forces on each other. So if we label this charge 1, 2, and 3, and without looking at the vector form of the electrostatic force, We know that opposite charges exert attractive forces on each other, and like charges exert repulsive forces on each other. And the net electrostatic force on a single charge can be obtained using the method of superposition, so effectively summing the force vectors together using vector addition. So the net electrostatic force on charge 1 is equal to the force exerted by charge 2 on charge 1 plus the electrostatic force exerted by 3 on 1. So if we sum the force exerted by charge 2 on 1 and the force exerted by charge 3 on 1, then using the vector head to tail method, the net electrostatic force acts in this direction. And similarly, if we use the parallelogram method, we can draw the force exerted by charge 3 on 1 up here, such that this force and the force exerted by charge 2 on 1 form a parallelogram. And therefore the net force acts from this point to the opposite end of the parallelogram. So therefore we can see that the net force exerted on charge 1 has the same magnitude and direction using both methods of vector addition. And also note that charges 2 and 3 exert attractive forces on each other. So have a go at determining the net force acting on these charges using the same method of superposition. Electric permittivity is a measure of the degree to which a material or medium is polarized in the presence of an electric field. So recall the Coulomb force, which was equal to the reciprocal of 4 pi by the permittivity of free space by the product of the two charged objects on the square of the radial distance between them. So we'll just take the magnitude of this product, which gives the magnitude of the electrostatic force. Now similarly, the electric field, due to a single charge, so for example charge 1, can be written as follows. And we'll look at electric fields in more detail later on, but you can picture it as a vector field going from a positive to a negative charge in this case. So this permittivity of free space is basically the resistance of a vacuum to an electric field. So consider these two charged plates, which are conductors, and a conductor is basically made from an electrically conducting material, such as a metal, where the charge carriers can move easily. So for example, a charge carrier can be an electron or ion and so on. So in this example of a metal, the electrons are delocalized from the atoms and they're free to move around. Whereas an insulator is made from a non-conducting material where the charge carriers cannot move easily. So for example, in amorphous glass, being silicon dioxide, so in this covalently bonded solid, the valence electrons are localized to the covalent bonds, so they can't move around easily. So we can model electric polarization as an induced rearrangement of electrons by an external electric field, which results in a separation of positive and negative charges within the material or medium. So for example, consider this insulator subjected to an electric field. So remember that opposite charges attract. So we can model the atoms as follows, where the electron is drawn towards a positive charge. So the atoms deviate from their spherical shape using a simple Bohr model. So we can draw a few more in here as follows. And you get the idea. So what this does is result in an electric field that opposes this electric field due to the two charged plates. So we can draw this schematically as follows. And we'll look at these insulating materials later on, such as glass, which is a type of dielectric. And the advantage of having this between two charged plates of a capacitor, which we'll also look at later on, is that the electric field resulting from the polarization of the dielectric opposes this main electric field. And that results in more charge being stored on this plate, and that increases the capacitance of the capacitor. So free space has a constant value for the electric permittivity, which is epsilon naught. And as we saw, it appears in physical relationships, such as the electrostatic force and the electric field. And the permittivity of matter has a value different from that of free space, and depends on the matter's composition and arrangement, as we saw. The following static charges are positioned in a square configuration at a distance d from each other. If the net electric force on each positive charge is 0, what is the coefficient alpha of the positive charge? So if we label these charges as 1 to 4, and we look at a positive charge, then we have an attractive force exerted by charge 1 on 2, and an attractive force exerted by charge 4 on 2. And like charges repel each other, so charge 3 will exert a repulsive force on charge 2. And by geometry, given that the length of the sides of the square are equal, then this angle here is 45 degrees. And now if we take a sum of forces in the horizontal direction, and the net force on each positive charge is 0, so that's equal to 0, and we'll take our positive direction to the right. So the force of charge 1 on 2 is acting to the left, so that's equal to minus Coulomb's constant by the product of the charges over the squared distance between them. And if we resolve the force of charge 3 on 2 in the horizontal direction, the horizontal component acts to the right. So that would be plus Coulomb's constant by the product of the two charges over the square distance between them. So this length here of the right angle triangle is the square root of d squared plus d squared by Pythagoras' theorem. So that will be equal to root 2 multiplied by d. So the squared distance between these charges is root 2 squared by d squared, which is 2d squared. And then to get the horizontal component of this force, we take the cosine of 45 degrees, which is 1 on root 2. And that's all equal to 0 according to the problem. So now if we do some cancellations, we have Coulomb's constant cancels, d squared cancels, the charge q cancels, and one of the alphas cancels. So what we have is minus 1 plus alpha on 2 root 2, which is equal to 0. So therefore the coefficient alpha is 2 root 2. And remember, by quantum mechanics, charge is quantized. So the magnitude of any charge is a product of the elementary charge, being the magnitude of charge of a single proton or electron.